Chapter 9. We gallop to one place and another, then back. It is like it was before. These men do not travel to reach another place, they travel to hide or to attack. There are more horses now. I am tired. All the mares that are in full are weary. The next morning my father mounted his horse and rode at a gallop from one end of the tooth to the other, looking at the state of the fields, the cattle, the sheep, shouting out orders, setting tasks for everyone. I was walking with Garak on our way back from a milking so scant we had barely enough milk to fill a cup. My father was riding hard, shouting over his shoulder at Garak's oldest brother and her uncle. They both nodded and started off at a run. "Your father is so brave," Garak said to me. "My father says he fights harder than any of them, takes all the risks on himself if he can." I watched my father pivot his gelding, lifting him back into a gallop as he kept everyone working at a pace few liked, but all saw as necessary, now that he was here to organize things again. "My father says he would follow yours to the stars and back," Garak said. I watched as the big bay gelding galloped out of sight. My father was like the old kings, I realized, like the ones in the stories. But the people who wrote the stories must not have been the ones to live under the king's roof. I could hear Garak's gentle jealousy in her voice. She wanted a father like mine. I, on the other hand, wished for a father like hers, a mild-tempered man who never said an unkind word to his wife or children, and spent his time with his wife and children when he was at home, not striding about the tooth shouting orders. On his second day home, my father left his gelding to graze and strode from one house to another, to the fields, then back, exhorting everyone to work harder, faster. The cloth my mother bound his arm with soaked through with blood, then got dirty. He let her change it only in the evening, and then groused that he had no time to be coddled. He did not smile at her when she brought his food or thank her as he had at first. Within 2 long days the fields were plowed, with the men changing to fresh horses and plowmen midday to keep up the pace. Planting began on the 3rd day. It was bruising hard work, I tell you true. We all slept like stones at night and barely crept out come each new morning. Women and girls cleaned corn and barley and oats for the planters to sow, looking for seeds of darnel or corn cockle that sometimes gets mixed into the harvest. Both are poisonous, so we were very careful. Women planted their house gardens. It warmed all our spirits to see the fine celeriac seed trickled into the planting sticks' tracks, and the tiny pebble seeds of the cabbage placed in the soft soil near our houses. Garlic cloves were pressed into the dark earth too, and leek bulbs were tucked into the mounded beds. Let them grow deep, long roots. The women traded seeds and cuttings. They planted herbs for healing and to add flavor to meat and cheese. It made my mouth water to think about all the good foods we were soon to have again. We spent one long afternoon setting out bee houses made of dried clay. We put them in the trees with low limbs and the eaves of the stockberries, and anywhere else we thought might attract a summer swarm. I selected my places very carefully. No one loved eating a dripping honeycomb more than I did, except Bevan. Every corner of my heart was lonely without her, and now I had no soft muzzled gray mare to tell my troubles to. Every morning I cried passing the empty rath. Garak and I trudged away at our labor, working with the women after we finished each pitiful milking. Every time I saw Bevan's mother, my heart ached anew. Her eyes were red day and night from crying. Tally was like a different boy. His high spirit seemed gone forever. The very sky seemed less blue to me. And yet we worked. We all worked like people in a dream who cannot rest. Garak and I were helping to sort the oats. Some of the seed grain had gotten wet over the winter and had rotted. We sat hunched over a cloth spread on the ground, picking out the blackened kernels. We had set up on the little slope in front of my father's house. There were several groups doing the same thing, scattered through the meadow, all of us going as fast as we could go. Fallen was walking a long circle between the groups of seed cleaners, carrying the oat seed down to the fields as we finished. She had taken 2 or 3 baskets from us without a word. Then she walked up the hill again to get the last of our cleaned oat seed. Aunt Orlay's fingers are aching, Fallon said. She asked if you two would take the rest of hers to sort. I glanced up and then down again. Of course. We're finished with what we have, Garrick said, standing up to stretch. I can walk down and get it from her. I'll go with you, I said. My legs hurt from sitting so long. We can work down there. Fallon made a rude little sighing sound as though we were finding an excuse to play while others worked, which was completely unfair. It made sense for us to walk down the hill to Orlave's house. It won't waste even a little time, and it will save a bit if you think about it, Aunt Fallon, I said in a voice that was sharper than I meant it to be. No, Fallon said, what I think is this. Once you get down there with the rest of the girls, you'll all start giggling and wasting time. We are not little children, I said, before I could stop myself. We work as hard as anyone. My brother might want to know that you are rude to me, Fallon said, which did not surprise me. She always threatened to tell my father whenever anyone did anything she disliked, and he often took her side. I stared at Fallon's angry face and realized something for the first time in my life. She was so very much like my father. She was entirely sure that she knew how things should be done, who should do them, how the two should be organized, but she couldn't give orders and have things her way. Like me, Fallon had been born a girl and would never have the life she wanted. Lara wasn't being rude, Garrick sighed when the silence went on too long. Fallon frowned. I was a little, I said quickly, wanting peace more than anything. I was too hungry and too tired to want to fight. I wondered if Fallon had told my father about the ruined comb. Without thinking, I slid my hand beneath the folds of my brat and touched the little gold pin. I saw Fallon looking at me, her head tilted to one side. I pulled my hand from beneath the woolen cloth and stared off in another direction. The last thing I wanted was for her to wonder what I was hiding. Without another word, Fallon stalked away, carrying the last few handfuls of our oats. Garrick and I waited a moment, not wanting to walk right behind her down the slope. We could hear her muttering, probably complaining to every blade of new spring grass about us taking a few minutes to walk the knots out of our legs and backs against her wishes. Halfway down the gentle rise, Fallon turned. Laura, she shouted. I am ashamed to say I pretended not to hear her. I kept walking, keeping my eyes on the ground. Laura, she shouted a second time. I looked up to see her pointing. There in the distance, just visible, came a girl. She was walking fast but not running, her cloud of orange hair a wild thicket around her head, visible at this distance and unmistakable. Garrett clutched my arm. Is that? She took a deep breath and held it. I nodded, my lips trembling, my eyes filling with tears. It is. Oh, thank you, thank all the saints it is. Bebin's coming home to us. My heart flew and fluttered inside my chest, wild with happiness and relief. Let's go tell her mother, I said, and Garrick and I set off running, racing past Fallon, breathless with joy. We found Bebin's mother and my own easily. Both of them were planting oats that morning. My mother's face lit with happiness at the news. Bebin's mother began to weep while we were all hugging one another. Fallon caught up with us. She stood watching with her arms